All right, Ms. Ogilvy, I'm going to leave you with this last question here. Please describe VA's partnership with DHS to implement the Immigrant Military Members and Veterans Initiative.
Thank you for that question. For the immigration bills that are before us today, I will have to take back for the record to determine if we have a partnership with DHS and the extent of that partnership. But while this bill would reform immigration protocols regarding non-citizen veterans, I would like to note that under existing laws and regulations, VA provides the same veterans benefits to such veterans as similarly situated U.S. citizen veterans.
All right, I'm going to leave it with this, is that this Immigrant Military Members and Veterans Initiative is a program that allows non-citizen veterans who were removed from the U.S. for reasons other than committing aggravated felonies to reapply for citizenship or return to the U.S. So there's two bills in here, H.R. 1182 and H.R. 1183, which we don't really need. It's redundant. We already have a program in place. Madam, I yield back.
So if everyone is ready, Mr. Marquez, we would like to begin with you. You're recognized for 5 minutes to provide remarks on the pending bills that we're considering today.
Thank you. Chair Luria, Ranking Member Nels, and distinguished members of this subcommittee. On behalf of the National Commander, Paul E. Dillard, representing almost 2 million dues-paying members living in every state and American territory, it is my duty and honor to present the American Legion's position on pending legislation being discussed here today. I will focus the time I have on emphasizing why Chairman Takano's bills are so important. I'd like to begin by stating that I am a retired Marine Sergeant Major and combat veteran with over 31 years of service. My family and I emigrated from Mexico in 1974, and I was raised to appreciate the opportunities this nation could provide us in the form of the American dream. As a result, I felt that as the eldest son, it was my duty to take the oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic. While my military career is filled with fond memories, I would be remiss if I did not address the difficulties we experienced during the various stages of the naturalization process. A journey that almost cost me promotions, career-enhancing assignments, and the same livelihood that I fought to defend on behalf of other Americans. My first assignment took me to Okinawa, Japan, where deployments were consistent and I was focused on learning my military profession. Discussions about citizenship revolved around the difficulties in applying from an overseas location, so I was advised by many to wait until I returned to the U.S. At the end of that tour, I married my Japanese fiancée, and she was granted a humanitarian parole to accompany me. After filing for citizenship in California, faced with an intense deployment schedule and a 2-hour drive to the nearest immigration office, I was subjected to canceled or missed appointments, lost paperwork. The struggle to obtain my citizenship lasted almost 3 years. Once I became a naturalized citizen, we immediately filed my wife's application for permanent residency, but due to similar issues I had experienced, her process took 4.5 years. Just prior to my combat deployment in Iraq, while I was aboard ship, I received frantic news from my wife that she had unknowingly missed an appointment and she was going to be deported. I immediately contacted my congressman in California, Ed Royce, and then his successor, Ms. Linda Sanchez, who was able to assist my wife obtain her permanent residence. I then headed off to combat shortly thereafter, but I was at peace knowing my wife would be taken care of. During the same 8-year period that it took my wife and I to obtain citizenship and a green card, my military career exposed me to significant events, including 3 promotions, 2 reenlistments, 4 geographical moves and address changes, 6 different unit assignments, and deployments to real-world operations in Central America, Europe, and the Middle East. My story is but one example of the thousands of stories that service members, veterans, and their families go through in their journey toward achieving the American dream, to becoming a citizen, and for some, returning to America after being deported. Over the past century, military service has opened a reliable pathway to U.S. citizenship for more than 760,000 immigrants. In the last few years, however, the pathway has been obstructed. Citizenship assistance programs have faded from military bases. U.S. veterans from other nations are serving honorably and discharging as resident alien non-citizens. They come out confused. Why did their service not bring them citizenship, let alone expedited citizenship they believed was promised to them? And then in the worst cases, they are deported and disconnected from the VA benefits that they earned. Thank you, Chairman Takano, for your leadership on behalf of our immigrant military peers who served honorably but were later deported because U.S. citizenship was next to impossible for them while they were in service, fighting on our behalf. The American Legion proudly supports the Veteran Deportation Prevention and Reform Act, and the Honoring the Oath Act that addresses naturalization during service and protects our non-citizen veterans and their families from unwarranted deportation. We thank Chair Luria and Ranking Member Nels for their incredible leadership and for always keeping veterans at the core of their mission. It is my privilege to represent the American Legion before this committee. I look forward to answering any questions you have on these or any other bills in the written testimony. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Marquez, and especially thank you for sharing your personal story. I think that really puts in context how important this legislation is, that we consider it, and understanding, someone who served honorably like you, that you and your wife went through such hurdles to achieve your citizenship, and we want to make sure that we ease that process for current and future military service members and veterans.
Thank you, ma'am.
I will now turn to Dr. Ruiz for 5 minutes for questions.
Thank you very much. And as a chairman of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, the issue of deported veterans is important to me and CHC members. It is appalling that such an issue even exists. No veteran should be treated as a second-class veteran. All veterans should be treated the same. That means if you served our country and you are eligible, you should remain in this country. You should receive your care, your benefits, and other help or due process here in this country. They risked their lives for our country, fought for our country. They deserve and earn to stay in our country. The CHC strongly believes that those who have served our country, regardless of immigration status, should not be deported, and their cases should be adjudicated within the United States, just like citizen veterans. To address this issue, the CHC has called on administrations for years to stop deporting our service members and veterans. We have also called on the Department of Veteran Affairs to ensure deported veterans have access to quality medical care. Additionally, several CHC members, including CHC Deputy Chair Nanette Barragan, Natural Resources Committee Chairman Raul Grijalva, Representative Vicente Gonzalez, CHC Vice Chair Policy Darren Soto, Representative Salud Carbajal, Representative Juan Vargas, and Senator Alex Padilla have each introduced legislation that fall within the scope of the Judiciary Committee to address this issue. While we strongly commend and support the steps that the Biden administration has taken to fix some of the problems, including establishing the Immigrant Military Members and Veterans Initiative, which will coordinate efforts with DHS, DOJ, and the VA to better serve our non-citizen service members, veterans, and their families. There is more work to be done. Today, I'm here to express my full support for Chairman Takano's two bills, the Veterans Deportation Prevention and Reform Act and the Honoring the Oath Act. The Veterans Deportation Prevention and Reform Act is a comprehensive bill that would address several barriers that non-citizen service members and veterans face. It would prevent non-citizen veterans from being deported, improve tracking of non-citizen veterans, and repatriate eligible deported veterans back home. The Honoring the Oath Act would establish a Military Family Immigration Advisory Committee that would advise DHS and DOJ on whether a non-citizen member of the armed forces, veteran, or family member facing removal proceedings should be granted citizenship. Most importantly, these bills would provide a better pathway to citizenship for eligible applicants. It is imperative that we immediately rectify this system for our service members and veterans. As CAC Chair, I strongly support these bills and look forward to working with the VA Committee Chairman and Judiciary Committee Chairman Nadler to also advance the AC members' bills through the legislative process and to provide the relief and protections for deportation that our veterans deserve. And I encourage my colleagues on this committee to support these bills as well. Director Marquez, you received your citizenship through your military service. Can you please explain your process?
Thank you, Dr. Ruiz, for that question. I appreciate the opportunity. So as I said in my opening comments, I chose not to apply while overseas because all the advice I received was negative, and the experience from an overseas post as a young Marine, I simply could not afford to fly to Guam or Hawaii on my own dime after taking time off from a period in my life where, frankly, I was learning how to be a Marine still. And so it was pushed.
Do you believe that the process has gotten better or worse for military members over the years? And do you see a discrepancy between junior enlisted members and those in leadership?
Yes, I do. First, I believe that the process has gotten better when in the form of some of the access online and ability for us to file our forms, but it has not gotten any better when we talk about the policies that have changed continuously with regards to eligibility of certain types of service members for different types of programs. And so it has become more difficult because of the policy change and fluctuations, and there's no consistency. So while someone senior has the ability and life experience to potentially tackle those issues and seek advice and maybe afford an immigration lawyer, no, younger service members are distraught, they're torn apart, they're in fear, and they're embarrassed to ask for help because it's a personal issue. You want to become a citizen, but you're fighting so hard to be a good service member, but you're afraid that they're going to label you in the military as a problem child because you need all this time to go work on your personal issues. So it's
That's
developed.
very important that we overcome those barriers. You mentioned that when you were deployed in Iraq, that your wife was facing deportation proceedings back home. What effect did that have on you while you were deployed?
Thank you, Doctor. It was significant. I couldn't stop thinking about what's going to happen to my wife, even though my wife is from Japan and she has a family structure, and my family is from California. The thought of me going into combat and my wife is back home alone on the East Coast, managing all her finances as a Japanese then citizen, barely speaks English, trying to get by on her own, it was devastating to me. I was worried about my Marines. I was worried about could I execute the duties I had to do. And thankfully, I engaged 2 members of Congress, as I mentioned earlier, and that's the only way that it was rectified. It would not have gotten rectified had I not taken that action. They would have deported my wife, and my command or anyone else would not have been able to do anything about it as I was headed to combat.
You know, and your wife served our nation too, because the service that our service members give is a family service to our country. So thank you very much, and thank you to your family and your wife for serving our nation.
Thank you, Doctor.
Well, thank you, Dr. Ruiz, for your questions and your support and work on these issues. For those who stepped up and served our country and have been deported, we want to ensure that we're doing what we can to help them and also smooth and ease that process for those who are willing to serve our country and want to make this country their country and gain citizenship, that we work to make that process easier and smoother.